Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video, and today it's time for another wrap up because June have started, so it's time for my May wrap up. I ended up having a pretty decent reading month all through May, and I read a total of 12 different things, and out of those 12 things, 5 of them were graphic novels or manga. The rest was regular books, and I'll just get right into them. Just look at my wrap-up page on my bullet journal. I tried doing some new with different colors for every book that I read, but that didn't work for me, so I'm definitely going to change that, but maybe I'll just change colors for every day, and I find that a bit easier. I did that the last week or so. As usual, I'm going to go from least favorite to favorite. I didn't read any 2 stars, so that was good, but I read a couple of 3 stars and 3.5 stars and a good handful of 4 stars. Since I have 12 books to talk about, I'm going to be quite brief with the books and just mention why I enjoyed them and why I didn't enjoy them mostly. Okay, first up, the first book is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborti. This is one of the nominees for the BookTube SFF debut category. And I had really high hopes going into this because the premise sounded really cool and the setting. So I enjoyed the setting a lot, and it was the atmosphere and the magic system was really interesting. However, the characters were pretty bland. That's just what I have to say about the characters. They're very forgettable. At this point, a month after I've read it, I barely remember any of them in a great way, and that's something I find sad. I mean, there are aspects that were good, but I think the ending was interesting, but I'd say it's not something that I am interested in reading on with. I think that the love story I was not into at all, and yeah, I think there were some places that this story could have done a lot better. But I really enjoyed the setting and the magic system. But I ended up on a 3 stars for this one. The next one I have to talk about is The Ship of the Dead by Riordan, the last and final book in the Magnus Chase series. I read this over Boris. If you've seen this vlog, you also know my thoughts on it. But mainly what I figured over that readathon was that while Riordan, he writes very similar sort of books and has similar characters in all of, like, main characters in all of the books, but what this one lacked a lot was interesting side characters. I get that he added a lot of diversity in the form of a Muslim character and a gender fluid character. Those 2 aspects are great, but I felt like the actual characters behind it, they were not fleshed out enough. So it's just like mentioning that he's added these characters, but not really doing anything so that we actually feel attached to those characters. And that's what I think especially the last couple of books lacked a lot. Like this last book, because I noticed these things and I was just missing some great side characters. I like Magnus Chase, he's an interesting character, and I like the Norse gods, but I think overall that this could have been done a lot better. If you think about Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus, I also discussed this. Heroes of Olympus obviously follows different perspectives, so you get a better sense of all of the characters in that way because you follow their perspectives. But even in Percy Jackson, I felt like Tyson and Grover and all of those extra characters were much easier to remember. However, this one just felt a little flat in all of the comparison to all of the other Riordan books. So I ended up on a 3 stars out of 5 stars for this one. But I'm happy I finished the trilogy. I just hope for a little more when I read it. And the next thing I read that I also gave 3 stars was The Reel of the Infinite by Martha Wells. So this book follows an exiled nun who travels with a mysterious sort of bodyguard, sword-wielding one, that she's trying to discover why the Wheel of the Infinite is trying to be destroyed. And the Wheel of the Infinite is a model of the world made in sand. and it recreates the world every year, so it creates peace and harmony. And with every 100 years, the Wheel of the Infinite and the world becomes one. So that is what she's trying to find out over this and all of that. I think the premise sounded really interesting, but I just didn't think that the book as a whole delivered. I felt the characters were pretty forgettable again, and it was really slow paced. I didn't feel like anything was happening. I'm really happy I read something else by Martha Wells before, otherwise I don't know if I will continue with her, but I definitely know that she can write a really good story, and I'm definitely interested in reading something else by her in the future, but this one only got a 3 stars for me. The next one I have to talk about is one of my library books that I had to hand in, so I can't show it to you, but it is called Vejen to Panteon by Boris Hansen. This is one of the Danish fantasy books that I wanted to read. And this follows a group of kids. They're living in this thing called the Zone, and the Zone is a part of Copenhagen, Denmark. Set aside from it, it's sort of just a lot of grey blocks, just where these kids are living in, and they just have to stay there. But there's this noise every day that they can't figure out where it's coming from, so they're trying to determine its direction, because every day at more or less the same time there's this sound and they don't know where it comes from, and it's very it's something that makes them all uncomfortable because they can't decipher it. But then one day, one of the group who has not always been there, called Cassandra, she leaves the group somehow and disappears. After that, this main character called, I forgot his name, I think he's called Lucas. He decided that he wanted to go after her, find her, and figure out what happened to her and why she left, because it was very abrupt and they were sort of having a thing before she left. However, they find out that in the basement somewhere they find a secret place that's filled with maps they don't know anything of, and messages and things and stuff that Cassandra has written to her to herself, but left behind. And then they find out in that cave there's a secret door to another world, so it's a sort of portal fantasy book. So they travel into this other world, and that's where they figure out this world is filled with gods and goddesses and angels and demons. And so this starts a whole new quest regarding Cassandra, the person who left. And honestly, the characters were a little sometimes, but I liked the magical concept, even though it was not anything very new. But one of the gimmicks that I found really interesting was that one of the characters, called Torkil, was a really big book nerd. Like, he loved all things fantasy, and he was talking about fantasy books all the time to his friends and why they were necessary to read and why you could use fantasy books also to learn something, even though it's nothing realistic about it. But anyway, so because he was such a book nerd, when they went into this fantasy world, he just brought all of his knowledge about all of the fantasy books that he'd read, like Tolkien, Dragonland, and all of those old school fantasy books that he'd read, and took all of the theory. So he was always prepared, or more or less, for anything that could happen, because he had the prior knowledge from all of the fantasy books that he'd read. I don't know why anyone has never done that before, but I've never read that part in a fantasy book before. So that was a funny thing, and I really enjoyed that. But otherwise, it was just an okay book, and I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then I also read Our Dark Duet by V.E. Schwab. This is a sequel to This Savage Song. And this book is set in a city that is divided into 2, basically. And in the city, in this world, monsters are created from every violent deed that you do. And the more violent the thing that you do, the worse the monster comes across. In this book, we follow 2 perspectives. We follow Kate, who is part of the northern, I think, part of Verity, and And she is trying to do everything in her power to be like her dad. Her dad is the ruler of this part of the city, and the monsters that is mainly taking over this part of the city is the Malkai, and I forgot the third monster's name again. I think I did that last time I did a wrap up as well. But in the southern south, where we follow August Flynn, who is a monster. He is a Sunai, and Sunais are the most dangerous of the monsters because they appear as humans, and so you don't know it's a monster before they decide to do their monstrous act, or their, do their kills, if you will. And August is a very conflicted character. He is not happy being a monster, and so he's trying to do right all the time, and he's been brought up by Henry Flynn, who is the leader of the southern part of the city. And so we have these two perspectives of very different characters that is living together. I overall enjoyed this series. However, I felt like the plot of the second book was a little slower than the first one, so I ended up on a 3.5 out of 5 stars in total. But I will definitely recommend this. I think this is the best V.E. Schwab series I've read so far. Now we're getting into my 4-star books. I actually only... And the first one of those I'm going to talk about today is American Panda by Gloria Chao. This is a 2018 release, and it follows a Taiwanese American character. She has very strict rules by her mom and dad, and the mom and dad has enlisted her into a college to become a doctor. And May is the main character's name. She's afraid of germs. She has a hard time with germs in general, so she's not really happy with this decision of becoming a doctor because of all of the things that she has to deal with. But she doesn't know how to say it, and also there's this thing about her own brother being banished from her parents because he decided to marry one that wasn't of their acceptance, and so they always expect a lot of things by her, and everything that she does, it's never good enough. And all of that, I ended up really enjoying this story a lot more than I thought I would. I compared it a lot to When Dimple Met Rishi just because of the multicultural aspect, I think. I don't know if that's the reason. And as I think that's wrong, of course. But When Dimple Met Rishi, I really hated it. This one I actually ended up really enjoying. I listened to this in audio, and the audio narration was really amazing and made it all the better. There was a bit of controversial talk about STDs, which I found a little lacking and just not really using it in the correct way. However, overall I enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really funny and fast read. Then I have Everyone's an Alien, but When You're an Alien Too. I really thought about this because the whole the graphic elements of this is super simple. Like, it's not the graphical things that makes this book for me. I really enjoyed a lot of the quotes and stuff. A friend is anyone or anything who shares a life with you that you would never be able to experience without them. If you're always happy, are you ever truly happy, or is happiness only something we see in you because we know sadness? And the truth is, we all achieve greatness. The only difference is the size of our audiences. And the harder it is to say goodbye to somebody, the luckier you are to have met somebody you're going to miss. And so there's a lot of cute quotes in there that really made me happy when I read it. And obviously I read this in like 20 minutes or something. It took me like no time at all, obviously. Maybe I just read this at the right time, because there's definitely a lot of grammatical errors, and I understand a lot of people who would be annoyed about it, and it annoyed me a little bit too. But I think that the overall thoughts and messages that she put forward was interesting, and that was what made me like it. So I ended up giving it 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next thing I'm gonna talk about is Valhalla, the completed saga. This is the first 3 volumes in the Valhalla series, and the Valhalla series is a Danish comic series that follows the Norse gods the Norse myths, and all of that. And all of this starts out with a good section where they're discussing how they came up with all of the ideas, how they came up with how the characters were going to look, and a map of Asgard, and as you can tell, different sort of ways. And then there was always, just before the novel started, there's a different how they come up with the final first edition cover. This is how this one looks, but this is not the first edition, obviously. And then there's, in the beginning of every story, there's a little talk about like a background talk about the gods, about the world and the myths and all of that, the legends. As you can tell, there's a little bit more in the first one than it was in the second and third. And then this starts with Ulven er løs, which is called The Wolf is on the Loose. And this is set when Thor and Loki has been on a quest in the human world in Midgard. And so it's quite a long journey, and they decide to take an overnight stay at a farm ranch thing in the human world. And at this stay, somehow Loki convinces Thor to take back Kjælfe and I have already forgotten the name again. Røskva and Kjælfe to be his slaves, basically. And so they come back with him to Valhalla, and so Thor doesn't really want to have slaves, so he's just actually treating them as friends or kids or whatever, but he takes them back and he's just letting Sif take over and get them to help her in the house with everything. And there's a lot of funny things, but when they come back into Valhalla, they find out that the Fenrir wolf has gone on the loose, and so the story continues with them trying to figure out how to capture the wolf again, and how Loki is going to get a new set of change from the dwarves, because the dwarves cheated him when he got the first set of change because it didn't hold the wolf and all of that. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the spin of the tale, and it was a lot of, as I said, a lot of fun. There was some really interesting moments, and I really enjoy the art. It's very old school comics, but you can totally see the distinctive characters. And here you can see the Fenrir wolf. I think the Fenrir wolf looks so cute. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the second story is called Thor's Bridal Quest. That's what I'll translate it to. And again, there's a bit of talk about how they came up with it, and something about the launch of the first one, and just in general how they came up with all of the characters and how they were supposed to look. And I think that's a nice addition. But Thor's Bridal Quest follows Thor when he loses his hammer overnight, and so he has to get it back from Trick. Is that his name? We call them Yetter. I forgot the giant. I'm gonna call him giant in this. And the giant is won't give Thor back his hammer unless he is to marry Freya, the goddess. And so Thor tries to convince Freya to marry the giant. However, Freya is not about this. She doesn't want to marry the giant, obviously, because she doesn't want to just do anyone's bidding. She wants to find her own love, if that's ever to happen. And so instead, Loki convinces Thor to go disguised as Freya himself, and then Loki would join him disguised as a bridesmaid, and together they're going to try and cheat the hammer back in Thor's possession, without getting married, obviously. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. The third story is called Odin's Bed, and Odin's Bed is about Odin when he takes a bet with the Valkyries because he doesn't feel like the Valkyries is doing a good enough job of giving him best warriors. So he decides that they're too bad, and he would show how easy it is to find the best warriors ever. So he takes a bet and says that he will, within a week, find 3 warriors that are better than anyone else that the Valkyries has ever found. And while he's away, Odin's own brothers have heard of his disappearance, and so they decide to take over Valhalla and Asgard and make differences that all of the gods and goddesses don't agree with. But they can't say anything because now they're in charge, and obviously if Odin is wise, then maybe Odin's brothers are wise as well. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend these if you come across them. They are translated into different languages, but I don't know if they're translated to English. I know they're translated to German, I saw that, and I saw some, I think, Spanish, Italian. I definitely know that's been translated into Swedish, and I believe Norwegian as well. But I'm really looking forward to read on in this series, and it was one of my favorite comic books when I was a kid. I don't think I read them in order, and I'm not sure if I read the first ones. I just read whatever I could find when I was at the library. The next thing that I read was Fullmetal Alchemist Volume 4. This continues, obviously, the story of the 2 brothers. At one point in the life, they were trying to resurrect their mother with alchemy power, and that backfired, and it ended up with Edward, with the one character losing his arm and his leg, and the other one losing his entire body. So now he's just this suit of armor thing. And then instead, so they're the Full Metal Alchemist because they have metal limbs and stuff. So this, I can't get into a lot about what this is about because it's the 4th volume and it would be spoilery, but I really enjoyed it. I think this is my favorite volume so far, and I'd almost forgotten how much I enjoyed it. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm really eager to get on with it. I know that Rhea has told me multiple times that this just gets better and better, and it's her favorite manga series, and yeah, I already sort of agree that it's my favorite, even though I also really like Fruits Basket. This one is a lot more for me, I think, even though Fruit Basket is supposed to become better as it goes as well. The last and final thing that I read and want to talk to you about today is Waking Gods by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the 2nd book in the Themis Files series, and this follows a world where they have discovered a giant hand in space, and as time goes, they find out that there are more and more limbs, and they put it all together to make one big giant robot. They know that the humans have never made this, so they know that someone else outside of their world created it, and who are they and what are their intentions, and that is basically all this is about, and all of the things that happens with that. And then it follows different characters in log files and news broadcast things and all of those things, and it changes between. I have listened to the audio both times, and I very much recommend it. They're really, really well narrated with a great acting, because it's a full cast thing, so it changes with every character. There's another one speaking, and that makes it a really interesting thing. I still have a little bit with the characters, but I overall enjoyed this one more than the first one, so I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it as for science fiction readers who are new to the genre, because I think that it is definitely very easy to get into in that sense. And the format is quite interesting. A lot of people enjoy it. I think the format makes it more difficult for me personally to feel connected to the characters. That's what I also had with Illuminae. I felt detached from the characters in that format. However, I don't know if that will change when I read on in that series. It changed a little bit with this one. So yeah, but this is the final book that I read, I think. So definitely let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I've been talking about today. What were your thoughts on them? What have you been reading last month? What was your favorite read? Definitely let me know about that as well. And if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very, very soon. Goodbye.